Welcome to the It's Your Story to Tell podcast, where brave people share their story to inspire others in what's possible. I'm your host, Megan Babcock, and I'm the founder of It's Your Story to Tell and the Coach Collective. And I am thrilled today to have Juanita Corry Jackson here with me. And we're going to be talking about life's unexpected turns and how they impact us. And we want to acknowledge pain, heartache, dark or desperate places can happen as we confront these twists and turns in our story. And if you or someone you know find yourself in that place, we want to encourage you to seek help. And if you need support right away, please call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. Before we jump in and hear the story that Juanita is going to share with us, I want to give you a little background on who she is. She has a lot of diverse experience that allows her to support others as a transformational vision specialist. I love that title. I love transformation, and I love seeing people's visions come true. And she's the CEO of Global Impact University Consulting LLC. We're going to learn more about that. She's a pastor, a certified speaker, a trainer, a coach, a realtor, and an international best-selling author. Whew, girl, I don't know when you have time to do all of those things. You must not sleep. And you also serve as the visionary leader of I Believe God Ministries International. And you're the executive producer of Global Impact TV. So, wow, you've accomplished so many amazing things in your journey. And God's given you a platform to help people reach their full potential by assisting them in understanding their giftings. So I know oftentimes our own story leads us to these places where we get to share what is possible when we do the work. And so I would love if you would just start sharing with our listeners your story and really how it's equipped you to do what you're doing and make a difference in this world. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Wow. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate this opportunity to be on your platform. It's your story to tell. So thank you, Megan, for having me as your guest. I wanted to say that first.
You are
And
so welcome.
man, you're reading all of that stuff. I'm like, who is that person?
Right? I know, it's crazy. That's a long list of things. And, I've heard a little bit about your story, so I know it wasn't always at that level, right? There were things that you had to go through and work through in order to really become who God gifted you and to be able to live out this purpose that He's accomplishing in you. So, there's hope, everyone. If you're not in this place where you feel like, okay, I know what my purpose is, I'm living out my vision, we're going to talk about how you can navigate and come to this place where you can really feel fulfilled even when there's hard things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you that in this journey where I'm at now, I went kicking and screaming. It was not the plan, it was not the vision that I could see for myself. But thank God he had leaders steps ahead of me that could
Mm.
see giftings in me and just kind of help point me on the path. But it wasn't until really truly that I surrendered even to what prophetic words had come to me, everybody else telling me the giftings that they could see in me. It wasn't until I found myself laying prostrate on the floor one day in 2012 that I finally had to say, you know what,
Mm.
God, not my will, but yours be done. I surrender. And I know we're going to
Mm.
talk a little bit about that, but it was really a journey of kicking and screaming. But now I'm living my best life. And I'm like, wow, what took you so long to get here?
Isn't that the truth? I mean, I look back and, what I think is interesting, and probably from the work that you do with people as well, you see this. It's a very similar pattern. We have to come to the end of ourselves where we're like, okay, I have tried it all on my own. I'm I'm done. Like
Yeah.
I surrender, right? You have to come to the end of yourself. And that's why, for people who are listening who are at that really desperate place, like amen. Because now is where the work can start because you're exhausted. You're ready to just say like, okay, God, what next do you want to do? And it was the hardest time when I was in that desperate place, but it
Mm-hmm.
was actually the best of time. And when I look back, I am so thankful that I finally came to that breaking place because it was what led to my freedom. It's what led to that transformation. So yeah, just walk us through, what was that desperate place for you where you kind of finally came to the end of yourself?
Yeah. Well, and I think it starts with how did the story begin? And I
Yes.
think we all tell ourselves or society tell us what life should be like. And for me, I had this big dream of I'm going to be married. I'm going to have 2.5 kids, a house with a picket fence around it, and a half a dog, I always say. Uh, but that was not my story at all. I did end up getting married. I had two children prior to marriage, and then I got married, had a child within that marriage union, and everything kind of went downhill from there. Number one, because I picked the person and not asking God for his design for my life. And
Mm,
so that's why I'll get to that at the end, but kind of why I'm this transformational vision specialist now, because I learned the hard way that God already has a plan for our life. And while we're trying to figure out our plan, He already has one for us. So if I would just tap into His plan to start with, I could save myself all
right?
of these hurdles. But
Oh, girl, you're just reading from my script of my story. Like, why was I so stubborn?
yeah, yeah. So I got married and just thought I was extremely happy, but the marriage was kind of doomed from the beginning. And I
Mm,
didn't want to I didn't want to recognize that problem. Like I had made this promise to myself because I had seen so many divorces in my family that once I get married, I am never getting divorced. But I never really prayed for a husband for myself. I prayed for a father for my children. And that's exactly what I got. So the power of our words. I had a father in the house for my children, but I never had a husband for me. And
wow,
so there
that's
was
so
a
amazing to bring that, again, your vision, right? It either helps you or hurts you because your words become flesh. And that was a very similar thing for me because I had experienced sexual abuse that made me believe. It happened in the time I was in church, and there was a really big focus on the I kiss dating goodbye, saving yourself for marriage. And even though there was abuse that occurred, and so that wasn't the sin that I was walking in that moment, someone else's sin had caused hurt in me, but because what I chose to believe in that moment, I believed I will never have a good husband.
my, yeah.
And I had two marriages that were not what God intended. And it wasn't until I surrendered that and recognized what I had partnered with, like the words and the beliefs and what it was creating in me. So I just wanted to acknowledge like how true what you're saying is, and how the Bible was telling us from the, early beginnings of time, like take your thoughts captive, right? Because they do become your reality.
Yeah, they
Wow.
do. They become your reality. And Megan, I had grew up a PK. So for the audience that may
Mm,
not know what that is, I was a preacher's kid. And I was like, I am never doing that. Now, I love administrative work, working in the background, all of that stuff. And so in this marriage, my husband wanted to be a pastor. And I was like, God, are you being funny? Like, what in the world? This
I
is,
said never. That's like, no.
would you look at
No.
my notepad here? That is not in here. And
Oh,
just knew in my spirit, like, this is not right. And the person who was my bishop at the time, our covering for our ministry, said, "You be quiet." Like when somebody says that God has called them to do something, just be quiet because God is bigger than you.
mm,
So, one of two things is going to happen: either that person is going to show up and show you who they really are, or God is going to show up and show you that it's part of his plan. Well, of course, the
mm.
person showed up and showed us who he really was. And we had just started this ministry in our local church here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I live, and new converts. And then all of a sudden, like there have been multiple affairs and all of that stuff. And um, to the point of him even having a child with our babysitter and just a lot of turmoil that we went through. So
Wow.
I knew
That
this
is a
wasn't the
lot.
plan. A lot. Like I can't go into every detail here, but a lot. And I remember that particular Sunday that he decided, because I was carrying all the bills in the house, and I finally said, God, I don't want to do this anymore, but I've made this
Mm.
promise, so I can't walk away. And if this is not the plan that you have for my life, you're going to have to do it. And God said, if you just get out of my way, like you're in the
Oh,
wrong place anyway. You're trying to be the head of the household. You're trying to pay the bills. You're trying to cover for him. You're trying to do everything else, and just stop. And so I said to him, you know what? I'm going to take my rightful place. I'm going to be the wife, and I'm going to let you become the head of the household and take care of the bills. And I'll be your helper, but you tell me what you need. Well, within a week, he was gone.
wow. Well,
Yeah.
what you just described there is boundaries,
Yeah.
right? And just being in our rightful place. And I loved when we talked our first time because our stories, while different, there are so many moments of similarities because that was something, I was in a marriage and I was like, I do not want to get another divorce. And I was just trying very hard to make it work
Mhm.
and not having good boundaries. And there was abuse that was occurring that I just didn't want to acknowledge, and I was in my car coming home from a meeting that I was working through my own healing. And for the first time in my life, was honest with my feelings and emotions with the Lord. I grew up, I just was like, God has a plan, all things work together for good, never really acknowledging my experience or my emotions and the trauma that I had been through. And in that moment, I was a little angry. And I was just like, why are you not answering my prayers? You said, if I pray in your name, it's aligned with your will, which you say you're for marriage. Why are you not answering?
Mhm.
And he said to me, because I am not an abuser. I was like, what do you mean by that?
Wow.
And he said, well, abuse is just putting your will on someone else and not acknowledging their free will. And I was like, whoa. And then he said, and you are also being abusive because you're not acknowledging his free will. And so he was like, I need you to do what I'm calling you and let him have his free will because you need to get out of the way so I can move and work. Now, ultimately, it ended in our marriage ending in a divorce, but God has allowed me to heal. and I'm not in the way, and I'm not being a codependent person who's not, I had a very wise woman talk to me about how when you do the right thing, it's the right thing for everybody. And because I was allowing things to happen in my home and harm my children, I was not being the woman God needed me to be. And if I was following his principles, then he could work. And so I just am like right there with you on this journey of like, get out of the way and get in line with me. Like, the only thing we can do is focus on our lives, what God has for us, and really trust Him with these other people. And it's really amazing how things then start to work out the
Yeah,
way God
yeah,
intended them.
I agree. And as you were talking, so oftentimes we don't realize it, but we become God in our own lives, right?
Mm,
We take over our lives and
yeah,
say, as if God is not supposed to be in charge, this is what I'm going to do, and God, you catch up with
right.
my plan, right? And I remember my kids who grown, of course, now, but would say to me after the divorce, is like, oh my God, what took you so long? Like,
Right.
we are much happier. You are a much happier person.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I was staying for them because remember, I got married so my kids would have a father. And they were like, but we're much happier with just being with you. Like, we could
Mm-hmm.
see all of the, even though we made a great effort not to ever argue in front of them. They was like, but we
Right.
could see the contentment. We could see that frustration. And we
Mm-hmm.
had to live with that because of your choices. So,
Right. Yeah. So then we are passing down generationally hurt
yeah,
and wounding to
yeah,
our kids because of our own hurt and wounding that has created then a narrative that we are living out, and we think we're trying to do the best we can, right? We're trying to honor God in those places. But you were so right when you said, like, did you ever ask him? Like, did I have this right? Because for me, it's like, look, you're trying to make something that was a sin right. That's never, you're never going to be able to do that. You are not the savior. You are not the one who can redeem this. You have to let me do it. And that means, we do make mistakes. I made many mistakes in my wounding, in how I responded, but God forgives,
yes, he does.
and He redeems when we release it and we stop trying to be the Savior, the Redeemer. And wow.
Yeah.
So keep going. I'm like, oh, God is so cool. Like how He just, is working in North Carolina, He's working in Oregon. It's this story or that story, but there's so many like
Yeah,
similarities
yeah,
of how He can lead us out of our brokenness.
absolutely, absolutely. So I found myself, I was gonna say, laying prostrate on the floor. Like my husband leaves. Um,
Mm,
Now in 2012, I am going through a divorce, and in the same year, my mother dies. And
mm,
I find my kids are grown; they're out of the house. It's just me in this almost 4,000 square foot home, and I find myself laying prostrate on the floor, saying, "God." Like, what is this? What do you want me to do? I surrender. And he
mm.
said to me, now you can begin. And
Wow.
so that was the first journey of just releasing everything. And like, I wasn't sad that the marriage was over because it was really over when it started. But just maybe even the pride of having it, right? Because now I
Mm,
have this persona that I've got to live up to as that I'm married and I got to pretend to be happily married even though I'm not. And
mm,
so just to finally release this whole persona of the thing that this is not your story here. And it doesn't mean the marriage won't come again at some point. I tell everybody I'm happily single right now. But it doesn't mean that if that's God's will, then I told God already, you got to send me an email. You're going to have to come sit on the sofa with me and all of these things. But I picked
oh,
myself up and we just, I didn't want to keep the church going, but again, these new converts said, like, we just found Jesus. We just came to know him.
Yeah.
We don't want to stop. And so again, my bishop at the time said, will you teach 2 Sundays of the month? And I'll come 2 Sundays of the month. And I agreed to do that. Well, that went on for about a year and a half or 2 years. And I finally said, like, when are you going to get a pastor? Like, you asked me to do this for a period of time. And he says, everybody knows that you're the pastor except you. I
Wow.
was like, wow. So in 2015, I surrendered. I said, okay, I'll do it. I'll be the pastor. And I
Mm,
got ordained as elder to be a pastor and began pastoring our local church. Well, our ministry had several churches. In 2016, he says to me, on one Sunday afternoon, if anything ever happens to me, and I served as his administrator at the time as well, he says, if anything ever happens to me, you're going to take over the ministry and you're going to lead it. I was like, nothing's going to happen to you. You're going to be fine.
oh,
Nothing's going to happen to you.
don't ever say never.
That was on Sunday. On Thursday of that same week, he was gone. And I instantly became the leader for now our international ministry. And I'm like, oh my God, like, really, do you have jokes or what? Like, it's not funny anymore. Let's change the
Mm,
story. And I really began to walk it out because out of obligation, because I felt like I had to. But
mm,
then a year into it, it was like, I surrender. This is where I'm supposed to be. And now I
mm,
absolutely love it. Like, this is the thing that I don't necessarily get paid to do. And I do it before all of my other jobs, and it gives me the most fulfillment. And because of that, all of my other jobs are able to feed me.
mm.
So
Wow.
that's my
Well, I
story.
think you just showed, you know, so often we fight against our calling and our
Yes.
gifting. And we're missing out with those things that you say never. Like, I would have never said, I will be on a podcast, much less sharing my vulnerable story as a perfectionist, people pleaser, achiever when it doesn't look so pretty like I had made my life out to look if you saw it on Facebook. And yet, it is just like what you said. It is my story was preparing me for this purpose to be able to go into those dark places with people and bring them into the light and allow them to feel seen and heard and known for, when a lot of people don't reach out or have conversations with people that they can't understand. People, when and my church was involved in my story and they knew a lot that was going on, but when it finally ended in divorce, it was like people didn't even know how to talk to me. I had been in ministry and had been involved, and all of a sudden I'm in this group of people and I'm alone.
Hmm.
And, going through those experiences has now allowed me and equipped me for an understanding of where there are needs that I can now fill. And it sounds like the same things for you and all the people who come on my podcast. It's like God has a plan for you at the time you are conceived, before
Yeah.
you were conceived, but
Before,
and
yeah.
then when you are placed here, he already knows. And so that whole fighting us, fighting it along the way, maybe it has to happen because it's part of what has to happen so that we can be there for the people who are going through. But if you can learn anything from our stories, like, just ask, like, what do you want? I surrender. You don't have to surrender in the desperate place. You can surrender when things are going well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things I have learned now through my life, and I tell people I've turned 35 several times. So one of the things I've learned after turning 35 over and over is that I come to learn, number one, you're right, God had a plan for us before we were ever even created. The Bible says in our mother's womb, before we were formed in our mother's womb. So he already had a plan for my life. He had already been to the end of my life. He had already seen everything that was going to go good, everything that was going to go bad. And he says to us, listen, you don't have to hit every brick. You don't have to hit every stone. You could just come ask me. And what I've come to realize now is that we don't have to listen to whatever society tries to give us, right? And we don't have to listen to every infomercial that I'm supposed to look like this and I'm supposed to do it this way.
Mm,
And one of the things I've come to learn and that I coach now, Megan, is that there we have contracts for everything in our lives. If you go buy a house, you have a contract. You read all of these things that they put in black and white that you're signing your life to. If you buy a car, you have a contract. But we
mhm.
never sit down and take the time to design this contract with the master for our life, to
Wow.
design it. And I began to sit down and say, what does this look like? And as I began to write down my vision, which really comes from him because he gives it to us. And so
Mhm,
if he says in Habakkuk, write it, make it plain so that when,
mhm.
listen, we always think it's somebody else, but so that when you read it, that you can then run with it, right? And do
Mhm,
what the vision says instead of trying to do everything else. So now I have this personal contract with my life, and I can have a conversation if God sees fit to send a partner in my life to say, listen, this is my vision, this is my purpose, this is
mhm.
where I'm going. How does your vision, how does your purpose line up with this? We need to have an understanding before we enter, because that's what
Right.
marriage is. It's a covenant,
Mhm.
it's a contract, it's an
Right.
agreement. And I enter into this contract without even knowing what my own agreement is with myself.
Wow. That is so good. Such great advice. I hope listeners will take some time with that because I've never heard it put that way. And it really makes so much sense to me. And I love journaling and I'm really big in visualization and all of that, but like the way you describe that, like in the contracts that we make, and how when we write those things down and we sign our name to it, how much more committed we are to making sure it happens. You don't want to be outside of the contract of your home loan or your car loan or whatever it is, because there's consequences to that are negative that we want to avoid. And so by being that clear with yourself, then it allows you to be so clear in the way you communicate with others. That's
Yeah,
so good.
yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about how you are helping others and where can people connect with you if they're looking for your services?
Yes, absolutely. So you can go to my website. It is Global Impact UC, the letter U, the letter C is in Charlie.com. So globalimpactuc.com. And without the WW, just put the HTP in front of it and it'll take you to the website and you can reach me there. But how I'm helping people is really, I believe I'm called to help people, whether that's ministry in the church or
Mm,
ministry in business or ministry in your home. It's all ministry. It's all a part of God's purpose for us. And so I think when we begin to look at that, I'm serving in my home, raising my children as a ministry. Just being married, being a covenant partner with this spouse is a ministry. And so I help people understand what their giftings are because we've all been sent to the world with gifts, talents, skills. And I say, whatever you go to school and learn, and that's good. Education is great. I have some courses that you can get. I'm not
right?
knocking education, it is awesome. But education will only take you as far as you've learned. But your
Mhm.
giftings has no beginning date and they have no end date, and they are powered by the Holy Spirit, and they'll work even when you don't know what to do. If you just
Right.
surrender, they'll work with you.
Oh,
And
that's
so I
so
teach
good.
people their giftings, how to understand what their purpose is, their vision, and then let's get clear and write your own vision contract for your life so that you're clear about who you are. Because sometimes we've been taught if you're not married by this date, something's wrong
Mhm.
with you. If you don't have kids by this time, something's wrong with you. And everybody was not sent to the world to be married, and everybody was not sent to the world to birth children. It doesn't mean that I still can't be a mother to something, that I can't birth a business or a ministry or
Mhm.
whatever that is. And so just being clear and having that contract with God, who am I? What's my purpose? I want to be in alignment with you, and everything else has to come in line with that.
Wow, that is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story and how it's brought you here and how now you're using it to help others. I will make sure your information is in the show notes. So if you didn't catch that, you guys just go there, click and go directly to our website. And if you listen to this and it really made a difference in how you were thinking about where you were in your life and how you might move forward, we would love for you to share in the comments and just so we can celebrate you. What God is doing in your story is amazing and we love to hear about it. So share that with us. And if you know somebody who is struggling and they might benefit from this, we would love for you to share this because our whole mission is to come alongside of people and let them see what's possible when they surrender, when they align with who God created them to be, so that they can live this fulfilled, purposeful life. And we need your help to get that out. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for being here and listening today. We hope it's been a blessing. May you have a wonderful week, and we'll look forward to connecting with you online again soon.
Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome.